Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're putting on our forensic accountant hats to dig into something wild. We are going to break down how a delayed product launch, specifically the delay of Google's Gemini 3.5 Pro, literally vaporized a massive chunk of a tech giant's market value in just about 1 month's time. Look, this isn't just a basic story about a missed deadline. It's a really stark lesson in how modern markets are evaluating the bleeding edge of artificial intelligence. So let's jump right into it. Okay, we have to start with this absolute monster of a number, $425 billion. To put that into perspective, that is the GDP of a medium-sized country, just completely wiped from Alphabet's estimated market capitalization recently. This single, massive figure proves an incredible reality about the AI race we're in right now. Absence has been brutally priced. We aren't talking about lost sales that you can just tally up on a balance sheet. We're talking about a severe, sudden market reaction simply because a highly anticipated flagship model didn't show up when it was supposed to. And this brings us right to the core paradox of the whole situation. You see, Alphabet's actual business fundamentals for the first quarter were incredibly strong. We're talking $109.9 billion in revenue, with Google Cloud surging 63% year over year to $20 billion. Absolutely nothing about those reported financials changed. But despite that stellar performance, we still see this $425 billion market cap loss from late June to mid-July. It perfectly captures how, in this specific sector, a shift in the narrative heavily outweighed the actual numbers. The market completely repriced its belief in whether the company is still setting the pace. All right, Section 1, the investigation. Confirmed versus unconfirmed. So to really figure out what triggered this financial autopsy, we've got to meticulously separate the cold, hard facts from all the rumors swirling around. Here's what we know for a fact. Back on May 19, 2026, at Google I/O, Sundar Pichai promised developers that Gemini 3.5 Pro was coming the following month. Well, that deadline was missed. Then, a July 16 Bloomberg report sourcing 10 current and former employees confirmed the model is months behind schedule and it's struggling specifically with its coding capabilities. We also have the confirmed market data showing a roughly $225 billion sell-off in late June, right around the departures of senior DeepMind researchers. But we have to contrast that hard data with the rumors. Multiple third-party outlets have reported that DeepMind completely discarded a near-ready model for a native Gemini 3 rebuild because of severe hallucination issues. Now, Google hasn't confirmed those claims, and every single circulating spec remains entirely unconfirmed. We have to treat that strictly as reporting, not as established fact. Moving on to Section 2, the multiplier of timing. So why exactly is this specific delay punishing Google so hard right now? Well, it's because these missed promises aren't happening in a vacuum. Let's trace it back. In May, the big promise is made. By late June, reports indicate a disappointing training data update that was supposed to fix those coding issues. But then look at July 9th. On that exact day, OpenAI's GPT 5.6 Sol and Grok 4.5 both launched publicly. Bam, right out of the gate. Just days later, DeepSeek's V4 family targeted their mid-July release. And then, on July 17th, another widely reported target date for Gemini just came and went. The market is literally watching rivals flood the zone with their new flagships at the exact moment Google's flagship is visibly MIA. The pressure here is just compounding from literally all sides. And why does this exact timing matter so much? Because enterprise evaluations are happening right now, like as we speak. Huge, lucrative enterprise contracts are signed based on what is actually shipped and available to use today, not on a roadmap of what might come later. Because of this delay, Google is currently facing the reality of being the only major frontier lab without a 2026 flagship model in general production. And it's not even just pressure from the top. Highly capable open-weight models like GLM 5.2 are rising rapidly beneath them, and they're even matching proprietary models on coding benchmarks at a fraction of the cost. The floor is rising just as fast as the ceiling. Which brings us to Section 3, 3 honest counterweights. Now, before we go calling this a total disaster, we've got to look at the other side of the coin. The market reaction might very well be a massive overreaction. And there are 3 honest counterweights that show exactly why a delay like this might actually be a brilliant strategic move. First off, being unreliable is so much more expensive than being late. Second, the very nature of narrative sell-offs means they can easily reverse. And third, we really need to pay attention to what Google actually managed to ship rather than just fixating on what slipped off the schedule. Let's zoom in on that first point, because if those unconfirmed reports about hallucination and reliability issues are even directionally correct, it perfectly summarizes the reality of the AI landscape today. The 2026 market punishes broken launches way harder than late ones. I mean, think about it. If a lab diagnoses its own model's failure and actually has the discipline to halt the release and start over, they are exercising sharp judgment. They're not showing weakness. Releasing a broken flagship would erode enterprise trust far more deeply than just pushing back a timeline. Simply put, holding back a broken product is the right call. And that brings us to the second counterweight narrative sell-offs. Absolutely go both ways. Sure, 425 billion evaporated essentially because of a story about absence. But here's the thing. Nothing about Alphabet's actual physical and digital distribution got any smaller this month. Search, Android, Google Cloud, Workspace. These are massive, totally intact distribution channels. This means that when the model does finally arrive, that presence monetizes instantly across billions of users. Just as a delayed story erased market value, a really strong, impressive launch story can restore that evaporated value almost overnight. And this leads us to a really fascinating inversion, our third counterweight. While the massive, large and promised flagship tier Gemini 3.5 Pro is bleeding market caps simply by being absent and making headlines for not existing, Google's smaller model, Gemini 3.5 Flash, actually shipped. It's out there right now, and quietly, it is highly competitive. It's even topping independent leaderboards for complex tasks like document parsing. The cheap and shipped tier of Google's lineup is out there actually winning, while the rest of the world just obsesses over the delayed heavy hitter. So as enterprise contracts are being signed this very minute and competitors just keep up this relentless monthly release cadence, I want to leave you with a final thought to ponder. We have seen the sheer $425 billion scale of this market repricing. But when you consider the immense risks of a botched launch and the completely intact power of Google's distribution networks, is the cost of absence a fatal blow to their AI ambitions, or is it simply the steep, temporary price of getting it exactly right? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep a close eye on this one, because how this narrative unfolds next is going to be incredibly fascinating to watch.